I assume then that if somebody wants to smoke marijuana, that's their business too.
That's his business, absolutely.
Are we going to take that to heroin and addiction?
Absolutely. Now, let me go back on that one, because that's a very interesting thing. Even if on ethical principles, you believe it is right to prevent somebody else from smoking heroin, as a matter of expediency, it's a terrible mistake. The largest...
So is jumping off the bridge.
No, I don't mean that. I mean it's a terrible mistake for society to render heroin illegal, because that increases the harm which heroin does. Why do we have so much crime in the inner cities and in the cities? Over 50% of it is attributed to crime for the sake of acquiring money to buy heroin.
Because
why is heroin so expensive? Because it's illegal. We went through this with prohibition. Whether you believe it's right or wrong to prevent people from drinking alcohol, we had the experience with prohibition in which we found that it did more harm than good.
And a lot of guys got shot in the garage.
A lot of guys got shot, and the more important, the basic respect for law was eroded. Law-abiding people who would never ordinarily have broken the law broke the law in order to get a drink.
Because they knew that the law enforcement agencies could not possibly enforce with any efficiency the laws against the prohibition law.
But the reason they couldn't enforce it was because it wasn't publicly backed. If the 90% of the public had been in favor of the prohibition law, you could have enforced it.
But I'm promising you 90% of the public right now is in favor of enforcing prohibition against heroin.
And you cannot enforce it. I agree. I was understating my case. Even with 90% of the people, you can't enforce it. And it does vastly more harm today because it is illegal than it would do if it were legal. Let me point out for a moment that more lives are lost each year through drinking alcohol than through heroin.
But
if there's a case, if you're going to make the case for preventing heroin on the basis of saving lives, there's a much stronger case for prohibition of alcohol.
But there would be some who would argue that to relax law enforcement or to take away law enforcement pressure on heroin trade is to ensure that heroin deaths will meet and exceed alcohol deaths.
On the contrary, it would reduce the number of heroin deaths. Why would it reduce the number of heroin deaths? In the first place, many of the deaths come from impure or adulterated heroin or needles that are contaminated. In the second place, as we found in Prohibition, the fact of Prohibition encouraged alcoholism rather than the opposite. To the young people in particular, it became an adventure to go out and get drunk, to go to a speakeasy. Today, with heroin illegal, it pays a heroin pusher to create an addict. Because, given that it's illegal, it's worth his while to spend some money on getting somebody else hooked. Because once hooked, he has a captive audience. If heroin were readily available everywhere, it wouldn't pay anybody to create an addict. Because the addict could then go anywhere to buy it.